Welcome to another episode of Women Investing in Women. My co host Robin and I absolutely enjoy week after week showcasing different women from different walks of life so that we have conversations about how other women have invested in them for them to become who they are today, and how are they turning around and paying it forward and investing in other women so that others can thrive. There's this notion that society has set up an inherent conflict where women have to compete with each other for love, for marriage, for work, for progress, for success, for everything, because there are only so many seats, if not only one. And that creates a competitive environment where there is no cooperation. And our goal through this program is to actually talk about how we break those cycles and how far we can go when we can support each other and thrive together. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of women supporting each other in entrepreneurial endeavors and how women can network and grow through that support system so that we build a community of women who are thriving so that we can turn around and support our families and be a part of a thriving society. So you're going to love our guest today, and Robin is going to have the delightful opportunity to introduce her. Go ahead, Robin.
Yes, I am so delighted to have Ellen Tyler with us today. She's another woman that I met through Leadership Global, and she hails from Atlanta, Georgia. So we have both coasts, East Coast and Los Angeles, East Coast with Atlanta, West Coast with Los Angeles, and then the Caribbean with Cass and Belize. So we're thoroughly delighted that technology allows us women from literally all over the world to gather together. And Ellen works in many areas in helping women, supporting, inspiring them. And what we thought we'd focus on today is her real passion in helping women believe that they can do business, that they can be businesswomen, that they can be in the corporate world, be it small business or the other corporate world. So I think that's really fascinating because I mentioned before we hopped on that all of us here are of the generation where women didn't do business a lot. And so many things have evolved over the last many decades. And Ellen, how did you get in? What led you into you yourself doing business and then inspiring women that they could be businesswomen?
Yeah, thanks, Robin. That's a great question because I always tell most people I didn't choose this. It wasn't, as you said, when we were growing up, it wasn't something that I even thought was possible or that I would even like it. And I think that's a big part. But in my corporate career, I always looked to work with individuals who could help me do better. And I think that was a great mindset. I was always curious. But for a lot of us, it's usually some event happens that causes us to relook at our life and what do we want to do. And it was just working for a company that they put a square peg in a round hole. And it became really clear that I didn't like this work anymore. I had loved it for decades. And I decided I needed help, which was either finding a coach or a therapist, because both can help. And I was fortunate that the first individual I had hired as a coach was still alive. He passed about 2.5 years ago, Bob Proctor. And I thought, well, of course I'm going to hire him and do this. And then they made a very small request, and a small voice in my head said, if you want to do this, come learn with us because we're going to train people how to do this work. And then I realized I do want to do that because I wanted to help women like myself have the same experience and opportunity that I had, learn that you can turn on a money spigot and have the dream you want.
That is very, very interesting because a lot of times life and circumstances take us to places. And if we are daring enough, we get to evolve. And so it makes my heart smile when I hear you say that. A lot of times, women themselves don't think what they do is a business. And the husbands or the men in their life also treat it like it's a hobby. And
Yeah.
women always approached it as a hobbyist. And having been a businesswoman my entire career, 34 years, I come from a different part of the world. We're raised differently. And when I have tried to help women through the local chambers of commerce, no matter how small the business is, men think of themselves as businessmen and women think of themselves as hobbyists. How do you help them get past that this is my hobby? I'm just doing this because I love it, to converting that and looking at that as a legitimate business because it's a mindset.
Oh, always, Cass. So the very, very first question I have for most is, what do you want? We often don't know how to answer that because it's something we don't think we can have our dreams. So as kids, we imagine you play with your parents' pots and pans, or you're given a broom and it's a horse and all this. And we have a wonderful imagination about what and who we could be. And it just gets lost along the way. And for a lot of us, it takes us a while to even answer that question. What do I really want? And when they can get some ideas into that, it then becomes, why do you want it? Because it's the what and the why that will cause them to do something uncomfortable. And it could sound like this. I started my business because I wanted to have freedom up for my time, and earn money. But then realized I also want to show my daughters that this is possible. And it's the why that becomes the thread for them to understand it's just a belief that they have. And so it's going back to the basics, setting some of the groundwork, and just getting them to dream again and understand they can have anything they want here.
Yeah, this is really very interesting because what's coming to mind for me is, what if you don't know what you want? You know, well, that's a big question. What do you want? It kind of reminds me when I was in junior high and we go to these presentations, be motivational, whatever. And they would say, well, just be yourself, just be yourself. And I would think, granted, now I'm in junior high, I think, well, what if I don't know what if I don't know who myself is? How can I just be myself if I don't know who myself is? And you catapult that into adulthood, and for women along various walks of life. So how do you get them to even start thinking about, what is it that you do want? What do you want to be when you grow up? Okay. Now that I'm 67 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? How do you get them to have the courage? It does absolutely takes courage to face that question and kind of spend some time noodling around in that question.
Yep. And it really is the time. And so I'll give a couple examples because there's not one perfect way. And it's really when we say we don't know what we want. And so one of my daughters, and people can always hear it when it's a little bit different, just not so much about the job. But she had dated, as parents, you'd look at this and go, the wrong person. Like throughout college, throughout everything, very loyal. And then she moved and was up in North Carolina. And knew that she was ready to find like who the boyfriend should be. And I asked that question, well, what do you want? Well, I don't know. Kind of hard to find a person when you don't know what they are. That's a needle in a haystack. And I said, so let's start with this. What don't you want? And in that world, it sounded like I don't want somebody who plays video games in their basement after work and lives with their mom and they're 35 years old. So it starts like that. What don't you want? And sometimes it is realizing this isn't instant. I have people work on this question for 2 weeks, 2 weeks minimum, because until they really think and start letting the floodgates open. The other way is just start writing. What do you want? I don't care if it's 99 personal things, like I want flowers in every single room, and one work thing. But that process is to really start asking, what do I want? What do I want? However many they get to, it's then great. Take whatever that number is. Now the work is take all of those and divide them into 3 columns, most important to least. The most important column is going to have you're going to see your common why, like mine is family. In that is going to be the needle in the haystack. And it's just by asking all of those questions, because we have the answer. We just haven't thought we could do it.
And therein lies the real crux of it, right? We don't know if we can do it. And then also the fear of failure, and
Yep.
then fear of doing what we want and not prioritizing somebody else. Daughters are raised to be good girls,
Yep.
and the goodness is based on making everybody else happy and losing yourself in service to others. And so, if that is the programming, how do you break that to make a place for you and truly prioritize you? Because I see that very starkly in the Western society. I was not raised here, so I get to see it like having an out-of-body experience, right? So daughters are raised so differently. And even when you talked about we imagine with pots and pans, we imagine with brooms. We never imagine building an airplane or building a car as daughters in this part of the world. So how can they imagine and go after something that has never been part of their line of sight?
Yep. The big question. And you said, I always find like words get slipped in, and sometimes people will not hear it. You said the magic word, which is programming. So we are programmed from a very young age, um, usually up until the age of 7. What we've been programmed with, we didn't necessarily put there, but there's generational DNA, especially on the female side of the family. And it can be to just start looking at that. Do I want the same as mom and grandma and great grandma? But it's to start looking at evidence that success is possible. I'm a big fan of shows like this to showcase individuals who have been able to break that programming and change their belief, because it really is a belief that we've accepted. And there's an exercise called the highlight reel, which just can help them start taking those steps and truly thinking about, which is to look, what have you done in your life that you've been really proud and really good at? It doesn't necessarily have to be work. Mine would include, I ran a marathon and a half marathon. I am not a runner. I raised for an asset manager $1 billion. I am a really good cook. I swam the length of an Olympic pool underwater. Those pieces that we can find in our life is what we'll use when we step out and start wanting to run a company or create a product on our own. Is we look and we go, if I could run a marathon, I probably can do anything. And so a lot of it is in the words that we say to ourselves. And I also want them to just start looking for evidence of other successful women and listen to their stories, and then say things like this: if Robin can do it, I can do it. If Cass can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, I'm really loving what I'm hearing. The other, and especially the notion of taking these pieces of your life and what are the elements of that success, of why you felt good about that? How can you bring that into another adventure? And so, and also that doing the balance between doing something differently yet holding on to the good that might have been in the past. And so finding that tension of what have I done in the past that might not seem like it has anything to do with business, and then incorporating that. So how do you help them take all these little pieces together and then weave it into something that makes sense for today?
And try and do this in a couple minutes, which sometimes is, we have a lifetime of experience, but it starts with some just really simple steps for an individual who is, well, I would say this. If the idea is in your head, it means it's possible. If you have an idea, Marie Callender, who got famous for pies, needed to make some extra money, started to make pies out of her kitchen, sold them at the restaurant she worked with, and then it became this multi-million-dollar pie company. The whole point of that is if you have an idea in your head, it means it's possible, because there is nothing impossible. And I want them to know that. And there's just some simple steps to go throughout the day to keep telling yourself those stories, because the biggest challenge every woman has is the voice that's in her head. And it's not a friendly voice. And it's the voice of our programming from when we were little. It's the voice that we tell ourselves. We talk worse to ourselves than we would to our best friend, because we say things, and everybody has them. I'm not good enough. Who do I think I am? This hasn't been done before. The best work you can do is to just replay a voice and say, I'll figure this out. Everything always works out for me. Find the words that soothe you into knowing that, and then take small baby action steps. Have gratitude every morning, because when we express gratitude, and it doesn't really matter where a person sits, whether it's universe, God, Buddha, doesn't matter. Gratitude opens up the world giving it back to you. And so if we start the day like that, and we start the day picturing where we think we want to go, and we try to replace the 90% negative thoughts and words going on in our head, that will explode them into taking small action steps.
Gratitude is such an important part of embracing a life that truly drives joy and peace. And I'm so happy to hear you say that. One of the things that prevent women, whether they're in the corporate world or entrepreneurial world, to live their full potential is their inherent desire not to get involved with money, not to manage money, and not to deal with money. And I personally believe that's a singular reason why marriages break down in the United States too. Because if you hand over all of the money matters to one person, you've completely turned over control, and you've detached yourself from the economic engine that runs the family and runs society in the Western world, right? So how do we make sure, and this is especially important to me because I am for 34 years in the world of finance, and I rarely see a woman in my world. It's all men. How do we make sure that women embrace the need to understand money and become savvy with money and teach their daughters about money?
My first love and my first profession cast was in the financial world, just like you. And I saw and experienced exactly what you just expressed, is that it's one woman to every 10 men in that world. And when I was there, it was because I saw personally where my father was medically retired at 43, and I knew nothing about money. Like, I had no idea. And so much comes from what we saw growing up. Our money, we call them paradigms, like what we think and how we feel about money does come from what we experience in the family. But just like a program, it can be changed. And it's one to understand money is just a currency and energy. We put so much emphasis on what it means. And I always say, why do you think it's called currency? Why do you think the word is currency? Is it's energy, and we assign so much importance to it, it defines who we are or who we aren't. I have money, I don't have money. I encourage everyone, and especially women, to start understanding it's as easy to create a castle as a button. I heard that often growing up. And it is that easy. Don't be when we're afraid of something. If I have a fear of spiders, they're attaching the same thing to money. And so I'll have conversations, and it's to just sit back and look at the control it's had and why are we giving up the control. And if it means that much in the world, which it does, then the figuring out of the money is the most important thing that they can do. When I was working in that world, it was always about education. Don't be the one that lets the other half, if there's another half, make all the decisions. Ask questions, learn about it. The reason I went into that field was I knew nothing about money. My mom knew nothing about money. They lived paycheck to paycheck. I didn't want that to happen to my daughters. I have 4 daughters. I want them to take control of their money. And some of the very first conversations we've always had is about money. So start those conversations. Start them with friends, start them with relatives. It's don't be afraid of talking about money. No different than talking about earrings or glasses or clothes. Don't make it such a big, scary subject because it always will remain that. Think about the fun it is and what you get to have because you get to have it.
Yeah. This has been such a delightful conversation. And with every guest, we say the time has flown by. And we'd love for you to let the audience know how they can get a hold of you. And also, what last final golden nugget would you like to share with the women who will be listening to this later?
So I'm very easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn, Ellen Tyler Coaching. My email is Ellen, ELLEN, at ellentylercoaching.com. If they want to find me, they'll be able to find me, is also what I would say. And the last bit of nuggets, it's so hard to boil it down to one thing, but I'm just going to reiterate, speak kindly to yourself and speak kindly to the people around you and express gratitude and wait and watch for good things to happen.
Thank you so much, Ellen. This has been a truly, truly empowering conversation. And I love the thought with which you are closing. Be kind to yourself. Speak kindly to yourself. Because we forget that we are listening. Just like we're mindful of how we talk to children, we're even mindful of how we talk to pets, but we're never mindful of how we talk to ourselves. So thank you so much for making sure our audience take that with themselves into the day, into the week, and going forward into life, because that is such an important piece of wisdom that we all need to embrace. Thank you for that, Ellen. And to our audience out there, be gentle and kind with yourself. You can't give what you don't have. So start with yourself. And when you start with yourself with kindness and gentleness and embrace a life of gratitude, learn about money, learn about the other things. And technically, the only thing that happens when you're afraid is you never get on that bicycle. Therefore, you will never get to ride. You will never feel the sense of freedom and the joy. So what if you let that fear down and got on that proverbial bicycle? And what if a magical world opens up for you? So go out there and try that and then embrace all the beauty that comes with it.